Well, let's look. If you look at your schedules and your rundown, you'll notice that, importantly, we're now going to be hitting the topic of making Australia the most desirable and memorable destination on earth. Of course, we all know that's already the case, but how do we convert that message to our international visitors? So what are Tourism Australia's game-changing plans to make Australia the most desired, considered and intended destination to visit by 2020 amongst our key inbound markets? John O'Sullivan joined Tourism Australia in 2014 as Managing Director. He joined Tourism Australia from Fox Sports, where he was employed as COO and previously held executive positions with Events Queensland and Football Federation Australia. Would you please welcome John O'Sullivan?
Thanks very much, Georgie. It's great to be here in Melbourne, Australia's events capital, but not according to the Australian Tourism Awards. It's actually Queensland with the Toowoomba Carnival of Flowers. So just saying. Hashtag just saying. Emma Alberici. Good morning. There's a joke, Bob. Bob said, use more jokes when I got up. I said, no. I'm going to spare them. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And firstly, can I also add my thanks to all of you for being here today. We do know that for many of you to give a day of your time is a commitment and is actually a cost to do that. And we really do appreciate the fact that you've come out again to be with us during this conference. And particularly given that we did decide to bring it to a new location down here in Melbourne as opposed to leaving it in Sydney, and which is again is part of our mantra at TA is to start spreading some of these types of events, but also visitation in our own small way around the country. Can I also add my acknowledgement to the traditional owners of the land on which we now gather, and elders past and present, and any other members of other Indigenous communities that are here with us today. So, as Georgie said, what I'd like to talk to you today is a little bit about what we are doing at Tourism Australia to really get to the heart of what our vision is for the organisation. And if you remember back in 2016, we spent a lot of time at TA really looking at our purpose, our vision, our mission, and our values as an organisation. And this was really important, not only just about our cultural journey inside our organisation, but how it then manifested itself in the way that we take Australia to the rest of the world, because we think this is really, really critical to how we do that. And what I'd like to talk to you about today, if I don't trip over one of the couches and fall off a stage, is really talk to you about how that's coming to life. Because at the end of the day, you know, our marketing purpose is about inviting people from around the world to experience this unique Australian way of life. And to do that is at the core of what we're about. There we go. It always happens at Destination Australia. I get the remote. Georgie's played a trick on me. She's turned it off. I came from broadcasting, but I can't use a remote. It's great. So look, a couple of very quick slides and information on just how we're doing as an industry. And the Minister spoke about it before. So I'm not going to spend, an inordinate amount of time on this. But as the Minister said, as Bob has said, it's a good time to be in our industry. We're seeing some really solid results from a national perspective. Now, I think as both Bob and the Minister have said, we know that this is not necessarily evenly spread around the country, and there are some parts of the country that are growing quicker, that are doing better than other parts of the country. And that's part of our challenge as we go through the rest of the year and in towards 2020. But if you take a look at where we are today as opposed to where we were 12 months ago when we had the same corresponding conference, we've moved that dial from about 65% of our target now up to about 3/4 of the way through of where we need to be against that upper target of $140 billion by the year 2020. And as you can see from if we stop today and we project forward to where we'd end up in 2020, we're ending around that $130 billion mark, which I have to say is getting closer and closer to that $140 billion mark. And really for me, the stat that I think is really, really interesting now is that we have become and made that move to become an Asian destination. We are at 50% of our arrivals that are coming into Australia now are coming from those massive countries to the north of us, and in particular, one particular country which we spoke about before being mainland China or Greater China. The Western market's still really critically important, but we are now starting to transition as a destination. If you drill into that now, into the international performance, and these numbers were released yesterday, we've seen, as we've heard from the previous speakers before, we're growing at around 6%, 7% in terms of both arrivals and expenditure. And certainly from the arrivals perspective, what we've seen once again is that markets like India, like China, the United States are growing more rapidly than others. And in particular, India was our fastest growing market, not only in visitors or expenditure, but also in visitors. It was about 15% growth in Indian visitors to Australia. And what we're seeing with that market particularly is the transitioning from being predominantly or VFR, but it's now it's growing more quickly as more of a traditional leisure-based visitor market as well. And we've also seen, as I said before, markets grow like the US, about 9%. China continues to grow. And markets like Japan, which 3 or 4 years ago were in a decline, is also coming back. And that's great for that issue around regional dispersal that we spoke about before, because we do know that the Japanese market, out of a lot of the Asian markets, is a market that will really disperse widely and into parts of the country like Uluru, up north, further north into the Northern Territory as well. So that's a really good sign. And the trends we're seeing, and some of the trends we're starting to see, obviously experiential travel is still a really critical part of what we're seeing coming out of our insights and data into Australia from these visitor markets. But we're also starting to see, a shortening of stay, length of stay into the country as well. And while we're having record nights and record numbers, we are starting to see people becoming more time poor. So that's naturally compounding itself when we get to visitors, is that they're staying for shorter periods of time. And that represents in of itself a challenge that we have as an industry, is how do we extend that and how do we arrest that trend. But overall, the story is a very, very good one. And as both the Minister and Bob have said before, the opportunity that we're seeing at Tourism Australia right now is really coming back to these two markets, the US and also mainland China. Now, we talk about mainland China enough of the time, and rightfully so because of its trajectory and growth. But also for us, over the last 12 months, we spent a lot of time looking at the opportunity out of the US. And if you look at where we're going in terms of the opportunity for that market, particularly from where we are today at around 700,000, we believe that there's the opportunity to double the growth out of that market. And as we've said with our 2020 goals in and around the Dundee campaign, we'd like to get this market into an expenditure territory of around $6 billion. We only have about 1.4% of out-of-region travellers out of the United States, and we think that the growth out of that market can certainly be accelerated, which is why we took the decision to invest in Dundee, and why we believe that this market, along with mainland China as we head towards 2020, really represents two really fundamental opportunities and must-win markets for us as a destination as we go towards that time frame. But also as we go out towards 2030 and that next 10-year tranche, we also see these two markets particularly being a big opportunity for us as an industry and as a destination. And add into that as well Southeast Asia and also the United Kingdom, which also is a market that we truly believe has also very similar characteristics to the United States in terms of being able to grow and accelerate growth as we go towards 2020 and also 2030. But the perennial issue for us, and the thing that we are still working on with you and in partnership with you, is in and around conversion. If you take this slide here particularly, this really demonstrates the challenge that we have in a market like the United States. And this is based on data from the United States that we used when we were going through the decision points in and around the Dundee campaign. And as you can see from our desirability, our fashionability and coolness, and I talked to Senate estimates last week about the definition of fashionability and coolness, which was a really interesting topic of discussion at Senate estimates. I think it was at about 10:55 on a Thursday night, so it was probably towards a viewership on Sky News of about 2 or 3 people, one of my bigger audiences. But talking to them about, what lies at the top of this purchase funnel. But then you look at our challenge is that we're number 3, number 4, number 5, but then we drop. We drop down to about number 25 in the case of the United States. In China, it's different. It's number 1 across those three areas of desirability, coolness, consideration, and intention, and we go to number 11. And that's the thing that we're trying to do, I guess, from a conversion point of view, is arrest the decline or arrest the issues at the top of the funnel so that we can lift ourselves when we get into the conversion state. And if you look in the United States particularly, that's a really pronounced issue for us to tackle. In countries like Germany, France, out of Europe, they're getting 3.6 million people out of that market. We're getting around 700,000, which again is part of the strategy and the decision behind Dundee, and also the other campaigns that we're running in other big markets. We also launched this week our 24 Million Mates campaign in the United Kingdom, which again is designed to really start to stimulate that market as well, which we know have got some extraneous factors that are affecting it, aside from the fact that their cricket team just came down here and got belted. But we won't talk about that. So for us, what are we trying to do at the moment? We know that Australia rates incredibly highly on those 3 bubbles at the bottom of the slide. And in particular, our food and wine product is very strong. Our natural beauty is unquestioned. The Great Barrier Reef, the middle of the country with the outback, we lead in a lot of those markers. And increasingly, and very pleasingly, our nature and wildlife is becoming more and more an asset for us as a brand, as a country, as a tourism destination. But the thing that we believe really passionately that brings all of this together and is the glue that really differentiates us as a destination is our people. And we've got 3 really good examples on that slide of people that we've been working with over the last 12 months and a little bit beyond in Hemsworth, Paul Hogan and Jessica Malboy, that really exemplify that. And for me, as I've said to a number of you before, one of the distinguishing things for me was when I went to ITB a couple of years ago and walking around the trade halls and looking at the other destinations with whom we compete on a day-by-day basis for that share of dollar out of markets like China, the United States and others, and having a look at what they were projecting. A lot of them had amazing beaches. A lot of them had amazing food. And a couple of countries in a place called Africa had some amazing wildlife. But the thing that really defines us, the thing that really differentiates us, and we believe is a really unique advantage for us as a destination, is around our people and all of you in this room. And it really came to life when Lisa and I were doing a lot of these meetings ahead of Dundee, when people were saying, particularly in North America, they were talking about how parties were always better if there was an Australian in the room. I have that said to me all the time, Look at today. I mean, it's amazing. But in all seriousness, it really is something that we believe can differentiate the brand from a tourism perspective as we go through. And it's also backed up by our research, and I know we show this slide at a lot of our presentations, and the CDP is a cornerstone of everything we do around our marketing structures. But if you look at those 2 markers, particularly around safety and security and friendly and open citizens, safety and security is a really core part of our unique selling point as a destination. But what it comes back to at its heart is about being a welcoming destination. It's about when you step off that aircraft, when you get off that cruise ship, once you've done that tour, you've been up in Skyrail and tropical northern Queensland, you get off and you feel welcome, you've had a great experience by the people who are around you. And we really do start to see now from our research that safety and security has always been at that top of that funnel for us in terms of a rational driver of destination choice. But equally now, what we're also starting to see is friendly and open citizens. And they are both in many ways very, very similar, very similar markers and drivers of choice of a destination. So we believe that is a very unique part of what we're we're trying to do, and we are very strong in this particular area. And you think about two particular things. Talk about our Indigenous culture. You know, this is the oldest living continuous culture of anywhere on the planet, 50,000 years. And this really goes to the heart of how our whole people proposition that we can take forward as a destination. And then if you also look at Australians, we actually want tourists to come to our country. And that's a really unique thing to have in this day and age. If you look at destinations like Venice, if you look at, even across the ditch in New Zealand and Queenstown, this whole area of social licence and making visitors feel welcome in your country is a really unique selling point. 94% of the people that we surveyed on our State of the Industry research that we did a year and a half ago said that they really welcome, they want tourism as an industry to prosper and also to grow. So for us, this whole element of people is a really, really important part of how we're trying to make Australia desirable and also memorable in particular. But it's also about scale, and it's also about size and cut through. One of the things I think that we've learnt as an organisation over the last 18 months is that doing many different little things doesn't always necessarily give you the platform that you really need to make an impact and to get cut through. And I know Pip and Lisa are going to talk to you a little more about this slide and this theory when they get into their presentation later today. But really for us, working with our board and talking to industry and our STO partners, for us, where we're really starting to land now and to get this bigger impact is really looking at, where are these markets that we can really make a difference? And we talked about two of them before, but also acknowledging that it's not just about those two markets, but also it's about how do we do things with scale which really start to move the dial and really start to get us higher in that purchase funnel and also higher in that conversion channel as well, because we think that's where we really need to focus our resources. And it's just, as many of you know in your own businesses, it really is about a straight resource allocation to get the biggest bang for your dollar. And that leads us to this little project that we launched in February of this year. And of course, as I said before, Lisa and Pip are going to go into a bit of detail about this, but I did want to spend a little bit of time talking to you a little bit about some of the origins of this, but also importantly the results that we've seen, because it really does go back to the heart of those two pillars that I was speaking about earlier, about our people, because at the core of this was about reintroducing that Australianism into the creative that we do. We started on that journey in 2016 by introducing Chris, or his voice at least, over the top of Aquatic and Coastal, but also then talking about cut-through and about scale, which is really what this was designed to do and the theory behind what we were trying to achieve with this campaign, bearing in mind that this campaign is still running in market, and Lisa and Pip will take you through some of the creative that's just recently been launched. But look, I can't start talking about this without actually showing you the ad again. And actually, because you've been so patient, I'll give you the extended version. I'm not in it, sadly, but I tried. But let's have a quick look.
That's not a knife. That's a knife. That's me.
Brian Dundee?
Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Why do you keep saying really?
You right there, mate?
Nothing to see here, man. Just getting a clean shave with my machete.
See you next week, Barry. When your dad did it, he was much...
Okay, and when my dad told me about this, he was just like, yeah, I just came up and you did this, okay?
I just don't think he can see you from back here.
Not a lot of crocs out here, huh?
It's just 37,000 miles of pristine, beautiful beach, mate. Did you know that Australia makes some of the finest wines in the entire world?
No, I didn't know that.
Thank you very much.
Wait, hold up. This isn't a movie.
No.
It's a tourism ad for Australia.
Yes. But listen, you're the best Crocodile Dundee since Crocodile Dundee.
Really?
Yes, really. And we had the best trip ever, didn't we?
It was pretty sweet.
Hey, there are some great flight deals to Australia right now.
Dude, I get it. It's not a movie, it's a commercial.
So, yeah, I think. I mean, and you know, you'll be able to give Pip and Lisa a big round of applause when they're up here, but they did an incredible job in pulling all of that together. And so, you know, and if I have to listen to Lisa Ronson read a script one more time, then there will be an audible screen. But what this gave us as a platform, and this is really back to these points, this gave us scale. You see the numbers here. This ad was seen by 200 million people. We've spoken about the numbers of people who it was viewed by and impressions that it saw within the social media stratosphere, if you like. You know, they're big, big numbers. But it also introduced us to a really new audience in the North American market. You know, there were 10,000 cities that appeared on Australia.com that we'd never seen before in North America, and also not only in the mainland United States, but also further north into Canada as well. And also, and very, very importantly, it drove value for us. So, as the Minister said before, you know, the total investment over the 2 years of the project was about $36.6 million. We've already seen about $80 million in return value of earned advertising value. But the really important thing for us is that people are talking about the destination. And we heard anecdotally from people who have returned from the United States recently how people are still talking about this. And I think the lead rate now is up around or over 200,000 leads. Getting a smile nod, yep. Let's call it close to 500,000. We'll just round it up a bit. But my predecessor did that, so just following suit. But you know, over that period of time, we have seen the leads handoff is really, really important for us when you go back to that original issue and that original problem that we are trying to solve, which is in and around conversion. And this takes me to these results. And again, Lisa and Pip will talk to you more about this later today. But you know, for us, this is the really satisfying data that's now coming out about this campaign and about our theory of introducing people and combining that with scale, but also with distribution partners. As we're seeing from the likes of Qantas Vacations, Aspire, Down Under Answers, you know, they're starting to see tangible leads and hands-off from their websites and from our website, importantly, into their organisations. And those uplifted numbers is something that we're really proud of, because we know that that will hopefully translate into sales, which is, again, a really important part of the problem that we're trying to solve. So that project, which continues to go and will continue to drive over the next couple of years, is really, really starting to show some really positive signs. So we're very happy with that. But of course, there you go, getting my remote issues. The other issue and the other part of what we're trying to do, which also goes back into these two areas around scale and also around people, is the area around business events, which the minister spoke about before. And really for us over the next 3 years, particularly now we have the Boost Fund in place, which is fantastic news and something that we know that the industry has been lobbying for and calling out for, which is really important. But we also know that this is a really important way of addressing conversion, but also helping us around dispersal and also around value. Last year we spoke around Amway 2017, and I wanted to talk about this as a really great example. We talked about that this event came into Sydney at the beginning of the year. It was around 10,000 delegates, which included another 1,000 support staff. It used something like 250 buses. There was something like 35,000 room nights. You know, if you talk to the Sydney fish markets, you know, they had a booming trade during the middle of the day when the sessions were in break, with delegates going down to the fish markets to buy, you know, fresh produce and so on. And the great thing is 12 months on, we were able to, in partnership with Tourism Events Queensland, Tropical North Queensland Tourism, and also Amway, secure the same event, but for Tropical North Queensland in 2019. And again, that takes that size and scale of an event into a market that might not necessarily have had some of those constituents that are coming as part of this event going to their market. And what a great part of the world to show to China, particularly now given the advent of more aviation capacity into that market from China. So in Amway in 2019, this is about the 7th time I think that Amway have come back to Australia from China. It's an example of what we can do as an organisation and as an industry in partnership together in bringing these types of events back into the country. And what's backing this up is that we're seeing from a couple of events that we've seen over recent times, we're seeing that there is a real demand for this internationally, as well as some other translatable results as well. And at the end of last year, we hosted Dreamtime in partnership with Brisbane Marketing in Brisbane. And the results from buyer satisfaction and delegate satisfaction was really strong. And that was great to see. But what we also saw was that the results out of that were also very strong, which makes us to believe that the demand for business events for Australia is, in the same way as the leisure market, is at a really strong positioning for us to take advantage of through the introduction of these new funds, but also our existing platform and windows such as the Advance program. And I want to call out Janine from Moon Shadow Cruises here from Port Stephens. Out of one event during the course of Dreamtime, they received a booking for over 1,000 people from China, which was a fantastic translation of that conversion problem we're trying to solve, but through a different channel, through business events. And then the final one is around the Congress that we saw in Adelaide during 2017, the Astronautical Congress, which is a different type of subject, but it goes to the brand of Australia being innovative, goes to the brand again of our people, because we do have some people who have been leaders in this field. But it also trickles down to the Minister's point again around the translation of what business events do for the leisure industry and other connected industries as well. I mean, you can see there from the slide there the number of bed nights, the number of people. What it doesn't tell you is that these people consume something like 3,500 Spencer Gulf prawns. They consume 3,500 beef sliders. They had something like 100 dozen of wine from the Barossa Valley, the Adelaide Hills and McLaren Vale, and there was something like 20 odd kegs of Cooper's Pale Ale also bought. But so the consumption and the ripple effect from these types of events back into the broader economy are also really, really important. And whether they're incentive events, whether they're association events, whether they're the exhibition sector, which we're also very strong at, we believe that these two parts of our offering are really well connected together. And again, going back to those issues that we're trying to solve about making the destination memorable and desirable, about solving the conversion problem, about using our people, and also about using scale, these types of events also are going to be a really critical part of how we take the country forward towards 2020 and also beyond. So with that, I think I've talked at you enough for one morning. Thank you so much again for being here. It is great to see so many of you that have joined us again, many of you who have travelled from interstate to be with us. For those of you who are new to Destination Australia, we hope that you come back again next year. Thank you again, and very happy to take questions.
Thanks, John. Lots to digest there, and it's wonderful to hear that tourism seems to be in such a healthy state in this country. As John mentioned, we'd love you to think of some questions. I'll kick one off, so if you're starting to sort of think of one now, please put your hand up in a second. We'll throw you some of the mics. John, what I was thinking about there is so exciting to hear about all these international markets. You mentioned India, growth in the leisure-based visitor market there, but if we're all sitting here and running businesses, can you take us through what it looks like to do something that creates a bigger impact with consumers? Like, could you give us maybe some other examples of what that would look like?
In particular markets, or?
Well, I know in Victoria the focus here is very much with India.
Yes.
But whether we start with that and then widen it out?
Well, certainly, I think in terms of impact, I think for us what we see is we've talked about Dundee. I think another really good example of something for us, but completely different channel is our 24 Million Mates campaign that we're doing up in, really targeted at the United Kingdom, and also what we're doing with youth, with BuzzFeed, who you'll hear from later on today, with Aussie News Today. So it really depends on, we use different channels, we use different platforms and different technologies, importantly. A great example of, something with scale that the industry, I think, has learned from over the years was the original Best Jobs in the World, and the creator's just sitting down here, Anthony Hayes. And that really, I thought, led the way for us in terms of, using these new platforms to talk about the country in a different way. So I think different markets, different segments of the market that we're trying to target use different types of project. For India, one of the great things we have coming up in 2020 is the World Cup 2020 cricket. And also at the end of next year, we have the tour by the Indian cricket team. And that is an event of its own right, because we saw in 2015 during the Cricket World Cup that market started to shift from being, still predominantly VFR, but it started to move into being a more leisure-based visitor market off the back of their cricket team being here, because it introduced a whole new audience into the market.
Oh, yes. I love it when we have someone straight up. I hope I don't hit you in the face with this. That's not
Catch it, Joyce.
good. Yes, nice. So you just talk right into it so everyone can hear your question.
Joyce DiMarcio from the Exhibition and Event Association. John, thank you. That's probably the biggest statement of support we've had for the business event sector from any CEO of Tourism Australia in all the years that people like me have been working with you. So thank you very much, John. It will go a long way. It's 12 million. It will go a long way. I'm just wondering if you could just shed a little bit of light on how the program might work, and some of the indicators that you'll be looking for in terms of ROI.
Yep, certainly. Thanks, Joyce, and thank you for that kind commentary. The Business Events Fund, there is a bid prospectus that will go online from this morning, or has gone online, which explains in detail about what we're trying to achieve with the fund. But importantly for us, what it's really about ROI. It's really about it being an international-based event with 500 people or more that are coming to Australia. It's a new event, but importantly, it's an agnostic event. So it's not just about association events or incentives events. It's also across exhibitions as well. And we will assess that, as the Minister said, through Business Events Australia, through the executive at Tourism Australia, and then it will obviously be referenced back to our board. And what we're trying to do is that we know that Australia competes against markets like Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong. This is a really fiercely competitive space, even our friends across the ditch in New Zealand. And this is about trying to give those entities that are involved in this particular sector an additional source of assistance to get those events here to Australia. Importantly, new events is what we're looking at. We're not looking at existing events that are already in the market. We're looking at working in partnership with the business events community around new events that may be an opportunity for them. So that's the snapshot, but certainly Penny Lyon, who looks after Business Events Australia, who's sitting down there. She's probably one of the happiest people in the room this morning. But Penny's the person to go see this morning.
Look out,
if you have any
Penny.
specific questions.
You're going to get inundated with requests, Penny. Okay, more questions. We've still got a good 10 minutes for questions, so we'd love... Wow, this is going to be interesting. I think I might trust... I don't trust my handballing skills there. Hang on, I'll throw it. It may be too... they're really soft. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
That was the wrong code. You should have...
I know.
Hi there, I'm Christy from the Shoalhaven. Just regarding our key international markets, how do you see dispersing China visitors from the big cities? We're only 2 hours from Sydney and we don't see them in our top 10. They do come for day trips, but how do we get the yield out of them?
Certainly, I think one of the things we've learned from looking at China as a market, and it's a great question that we get often from regional centres, is that as a market, they're still fairly new to us in terms of, the growth has been over 6 years. Over the last 6 years, it's really accelerated. So as that market starts to mature, you will start to see them get more and more adventurous. And as we see that market become more independent, which is who we really, in conjunction with the states and territory tourism organisations, have really focused on is the independent traveller out of that market, because we know they are becoming more adventurous, more into self-drive, more inclined to get out of the major cities and into regional parts of Australia. But fundamentally also, you've got to give them a reason to come, and natural beauty is part of it. Food and wine's a big part of it, but you've got to have those attractions and experiences that will resonate for them and that they'll be appealing to them. And so it's something that it's a combination of factors of the market maturing, the type of visitor that's coming from the market, and then importantly the destination being able to offer that experience. One of the key areas that we find really important to work on is working through our media hosting programs, which ourselves and the States do in partnership. The use of social media, so WeChat, Weibo, Nice, which is the Chinese version of Instagram, is also really important, and telling that story about the destination. And the other opportunity we think for regional parts of the country also is working with the local Chinese communities, the student bases that are here. Often those students are, they call them the Daigo, who are, some of the biggest marketers of products and Chinese consumption in the country.
And Nicholas Chu will be fantastic for that this afternoon, because that's specifically what he's going to be talking about, and particularly on the digital platform, how we attract that market. So that should be an interesting chat.
But also Fred Luan from our China office is here. Where are you, Fred? Stand up. There he is. That's Fred. Fred's our regional general manager of marketing, so please grab him during the break. And Pip Harrison's also here with us as well.
Great, thank you.
A couple more questions. Still got time for a few more. Yes, can I get you just to throw the
Here we go.
mic? Thank you.
Do you?
Girly pass. Angela Freeman, Wildlife Tropical North Queensland, down from Cairns. My question, because we enjoy a strong visitation from the Scandinavian market, is that there's been quite a bit of funding pulled back from there in order to make other funding available for the big things. If we are fortunate enough to really push above our weight and actually achieve some of these goals, is there any chance of getting some of that money back so that we can support some of those loyal markets?
Sure. We, on Scandinavia this year, we actually, the levels of investment we've made in Scandinavia for this year is, I think, circa around 500,000, which is actually quite a significant amount of money for us. But to your point, the way that we budget is I think I used the word when I was at estimates once of it, it's a dynamic budgeting, where we move it where we see the opportunity. And like we similarly did with Dundee, we will similarly look at other opportunities in other markets if the opportunity's there.
More questions? Yep. At the back. Yes.
Hi, John.
Hi, mate.
Georgie, Stu Gregor,
Hello,
Four Pillars
Stu.
Gin. Hi. It might seem a little bit semantic, but I think it's kind of important. You've referenced 3 or 4 times food and wine. We've got a huge burgeoning distillery community in Australia, great craft beer community in Australia. Any chance you guys could start talking about food and drink? We get huge numbers of international visitors.
Yep.
All through regional and rural Australia, as well as urban, visiting our great new distilleries, as well as craft beer breweries. Any chance? Food and wine's not all about wine, John. Come on, mate.
Stu's on a roll this week, because Stu, you wrote a column this week about taxes on spirits.
If you were from Bundaberg Rum, I'd probably say yes, but...
what about Four Pillars Gin? Four Pillars Gin.
No, look, we'll have a look at that for you. But it is important that when we launch Restaurant Australia, we talk about food and wine. The wine industry is doing an amazing job, particularly in markets like China. But we get the nuance. But importantly, when we do bring Restaurant Australia to life, when we bring these groups down for these events like World's 50 Best, we're making sure that we spread the visitors. We're spreading the creative across every facet of the industry. So not just the restaurants. We're talking about producers. We go to distilleries. We go to wineries, and so on. So we are doing that in action. I know the title may not reflect that, but we are. Our actions are backing that up.
Thanks for that commitment. We love that.
If you're Bundaberg Rum, sure.
It's an interesting point though, because particularly in this game, words are important. And if it was food and drink, I think it is just a matter of getting used to it, isn't it? Because I'm going to play. I do love Stu's distillery, but if I go down to Yarra Valley now, I'm actually more likely to go to a distillery, probably slightly more than a winery now because of the experience for me and getting the paddles. And so yeah, it is interesting that words play a massive role in what we do in our
Yeah, I think it also, but also in all seriousness, I think it does also come down to our actions. So, when we bring media out, we do take them across the full gambit of what we have. So we'll take them into, we'll take them in the Hunter Valley, see, Audrey Wilkinson, or in the Adelaide Hills, we'll go to the Lane. But we'll also take them to places like Archie Rose, and we'll take them into other parts of the, that food offering, if you like. So,
or have kombucha like I do. Like, it's so interesting that we are changing with our, and I will, if I go to Attica here in Melbourne, I will often, because I'm driving, I'll have their non-alcoholic, incredible non-alcoholic wine list type thing, the cocktails, and the herbal cocktails. Probably got time for one, maybe two more questions.
Can I throw to you?
Not confident. Great.
No, I couldn't catch that. Okay, sorry, I'm going to have to read from notes for this one. Jennifer Horner, Tourism WA. I have a question about cruise. So we know that cruise attracts international visitors, fly cruise options, the guests are very brand loyal, and we know that they do pre and post touring when they're in destination. So I'd just like to get a view from you, John, if possible, about Tourism Australia's position on developing cruise shipping, please.
Look, we have left that to the states and territories predominantly over the last few years, predominantly because it's been, the majority of those visitors have been, the growth has been out of domestic. We had a discussion amongst the CEOs a couple of weeks ago about looking at some further research into the cruise market. And we have done selected work through our Aussie Specialist program on actually talking to the distribution offshore about the cruise opportunities in Australia.
We have one more over here. Yes, do you have a microphone?
Yes, I do, and I didn't have to catch it. Hi, good morning, John. It's Nikki Kenyon from Visit Victoria. I'm the General Manager of Consumer Markets. And Georgie, thank you for your plugs of Victoria. Keep them coming. John, I was in Berlin last week for ITB and heard a very interesting presentation by Doug Lansky talking about over-tourism. And I'm just wondering what your view is on whether it is an issue for Australia, or if it's going to be in the future, or if the reverse is true and that it's an advantage that we don't have hordes of people. I mean, clearly it was a European-based audience, but it just got me thinking about what we maybe need to do to prepare for the future. His view was, rather than promoting a message about getting more people to visit, how do we as the industry just promote bigger spend? So perhaps fewer people and just get them to spend more money, which does the same effect of growing the industry. So just interested on your views for Australia.
Well, the first thing I'd say is great to see that Doug's read the 2020 strategy, because it's about yield and it's not about numbers of visitors. And I say that with being serious, because that's what our strategy's been built around. You've got to look at the numbers on this. Australia's ratio of international visitors to population, it's 1 to 3. In places like Barcelona and Venice, it's actually inverted, it's 3 to 1. And we know there are pockets around Australia that there is some, where there's infrastructure constraints and are popular with international visitors, there are some issues, but it hasn't yet translated to where we're seeing local governments or a political platform where people are anti-visitors. In fact, it's quite the opposite here. I mean, you look at local government, state government, around the country, and it is pro the visitor economy. I think the whole area around social licence is really important, and in Beyond 2020 work we're starting to do, that's going to become more and more a factor. But we as an industry, and you as an industry, well before my time in 2010, when you signed up to 2020, it was about yield as opposed to volume, and we've done that in the way that we target that high-value traveller overseas and that independent traveller in markets like China and other markets because of that yield factor. So I think we watch it, we look at our research, we haven't seen anything that's come up to date that suggested that it's a big issue looming. We know that, places like the Great Ocean Road, there are some, which is linked back more to infrastructure. But, at the moment, we're 1 to 3. Most of these other markets are 3 to 1, 5 to 1. So...
Thank you.
And congratulations to Visit Victoria too for they launched their new China-specific campaign this week. I think Pete Bingham's been up in China, so congratulations to the team for that as well. It looks really good.
Thank you. That was a great
Thank you again.
Okay, well that's a wrap. Can you please thank John O'Sullivan, everyone? Thank you, John.